Yes, a state is an entity, it's not a person, it's a group of persons, and of course it's a group that changes through time and makes decisions not singularly as a person would, but from a plurality of persons. So I go to the police and I appeal about so-and-so. I pay my tax to a different person. They are not necessarily doing things that are consistent with each other. And not only that, but the very agents themselves may be acting differently, although it's the same corpus or body that they belong to. But it's not a body in the sense of being a person. It's a group of persons. And each individual is not in charge of what the entity does. The entity does different things according to a plurality within it. In other words, it's a nightmare. I mean, I don't mean that literally. I mean, it's problematic. It's inconsistent through time and within time too. It's holding one view and another at the same time. To some extent, of course, we get a plurality with persons. They are not perfectly consistent, but they have a responsibility to be so. I don't quite know how to put that in a more successful way, but you can expect a consistency, and you can appeal to the person you're talking to a real consistency, but the state can't. It says, well, I'm sorry, these are the rules. I don't make them. This is made by a different part of the state called the legislature or the executive. You know, the current government and leaders and so on. And it's not a leader that's running it. There's a leader that's attempting to coordinate it, but he can't. And he is not responsible for certain aspects of the society. So, we're trying to treat it as if the state were a person, and we may have legalized it as a person. I think we have, in the same way as we've legalized a joint stock company. With a partnership, we know we haven't. We can look at a partnership and say, well, you've agreed to work together, yes, but I can sue you individually for the decision. You don't do that with the state. The state is invulnerable. You can't say, well, this decision was wrong and therefore I'm suing the department about it. You can only say, did it act within the framework that it was given? And the answer is yes, and it acts inconsistently with, the tax department might not be taxing enough to do what the expenditure and organisation department is doing as regards spending money. So you get a situation where another part of the state has to come up with the finance in a different way, so it borrows instead of taxing. Appeal to different parts of the state has different values. The judiciary says one thing, but the legislature has rules as another, and the rules may not be consistent. And you can appeal to the state for consistency, but you simply come up against barriers that say, I don't have the power to do that, and that can only be changed by a part of the system, and at the minute it's so and so. So we have a situation where, for instance, the state may want safety. It achieves it by having legality and rules, and enforcing those rules with the police. But the police are responsible for enforcing rules, not deciding whether the rules are themselves safe or not. So you appeal to the police and they say, well, that's the law. You appeal to the state and you say, well, that can only be changed by a certain procedure, an agreement which only happens with a particular government, and the government's not interested in doing that at the moment. It's got other priorities. So you regularly find with the state that you're being confined by legalities and rules that are inconsistent with what you understood the values of the state to be. At worst, different people, and within the organisation itself, take the state to have different values, because they have different values, and they want the state to have their particular view. There are procedures where you can appeal to a sort of higher body to find a resolution here, but they don't have the flexibility of a person. They have a procedure even to do that, and it's not on the agenda at the minute, so, and it never has been, say, and it takes centuries before it changes, if indeed it ever does. The state is an entity, but that entity is not a person. It's a kaleidoscope of different and changing persons. You can't hold the state responsible. You can only go to war with it if you don't like what's happening. Whereas with an individual, you can appeal to them, and in terms of a relationship, I've known you as a friend, shouldn't you be cooperative here? And if a friend is not cooperative, you can start to disown him as a friend, of course, and say, well, I'll have to treat you differently. You can't do that with the state. It's an entity that's far more powerful than you are. And it's not a person. Has no soul and consistent identity. It may strive to be consistent, of course, but its vast plurality means it's not. If you're dealing with a state, it's quite different to dealing with a friend, an acquaintance, or an enemy. And in a sense, it can be an entity that's far more powerful than an individual person, and far less consistent, and has no sense of loyalty, because the people keep changing that constitute the state. It doesn't have a single head usually that you can effectively appeal to, unless it's the most appalling autocracy, in which case you're not dealing with the state, you're dealing with him, the king, or the dictator. And as we found out, this is a frightening thing to live under, and when we come close to it with people like Hitler or Stalin or the emperor in Rome, it could be anything but acceptable to your values and so on. So I pray not for the world. The world does not exist as a person. I care for individuals. I relate to individuals. And the state is an overarching structure that greatly handicaps any individual in being and displaying his freedom and his individuality and his personhood, his responsibility and relationship to you. And there's all sorts of problems with this entity. It's like the joint stock company. There's great problems with it because we've made it, for instance, to be, that the individual members are not responsible beyond the money they put up in the first place. They may lose their investment in the company if the shares, become worthless on the market. And there's no morality or appeal in the structure. It simply says, well, hard luck, you invested in something that didn't work out, you've lost it, And you say, but I was unable to influence it. I was just one shareholder. Why should I take the responsibility? You say, well, you were already committed to washing your hands of that amount of power and simply being subject to what happened. You see, I can't appeal to any one person and for redress of grievance. It's simply the way things are. Take it or leave it. Nothing you can do about it. Governments are the same. You can't hold them responsible. They say, well, we made this decision and it wasn't even we. I was only a part of it. Or I wasn't part of it at all, but I'm constrained by it because it's the law. You're not dealing with a person who can say, oh yeah, I see what you mean. Right, do so and so. Strictly speaking, the policeman can't say to you, well, I understand that it seems to be reasonable that you are speeding here. He simply says, well, you are speeding and I'm booking you. There is an appeal procedure, or there isn't, but that's the way it is. And you can appeal to it if you like, but the judge may just say, well, no, so-and-so, because he's not a judge, he's an administrator. In other words, he's not really responsible for the decision. Whereas with a person, they always are. You say, hey, but I did so-and-so, and you said so-and-so. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Here, so-and-so, we'll put that right. The agent you're dealing with is not necessarily the administrator who is given the power by the structure to redress your grievance. And there may be none that are willing or able to do this in the structure. The structure is not a person, it's a structure. So it's one thing to have a benevolent dictator, and a dictator in a pure form would be one with all power. There's no such thing. There is simply a person who has a great deal of power, but he's in a fix himself. So he acts from a reality of being in a fix. He can't do so-and-so, and he's holding things together by all sorts of deceit and all things to all people, and getting in under certain promises but not carrying them out, and not being held responsible in any way. He's not the government any longer, so there's no point in going to him. He's not the current Prime Minister or whatnot. And the Prime Minister, if they make a mistake from the point of view of losing cooperation of the rest of the group, find they can't achieve other goals. So you have I mean, if you want to call it a persona, it's a very shifty one, and it is constantly fluctuating and changing in character. It's a nightmare of a person. It's an extremely unethical person in that way. So if you put your faith in this sort of friend, you're going to be incredibly disappointed on many issues. And it's going to be very unsatisfactory. You should worship God, not the state. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.